Hi, Anna. Thank you so much for joining me. Anna is one of our resident therapists this year, and you had some questions about how to bring one's spirituality or spiritual concepts into therapy sessions. So yeah, let's dig in.
Yeah, so my first question for this topic is how do you typically begin the conversation with introducing spirituality into your sessions?
Hmm. Well, I think this is probably the main thing that I'm going to say, and something that you've kind of heard me say before, actually. It is not like a topic. So, as a therapist, I don't feel like I bring any technique or topic um, into the session like pieces of information, right? Um, but instead, I think, you know, we use ourselves, our personhood, our experience, our thoughts and feelings like we are the tool in therapy, right?
Hmm.
So the truth is that I am a very spiritual person. I have spiritual practices. And so when it comes into session, first of all, it comes in not as an introduction, although I might say, with a new client, I might say, I'll out myself as a very spiritual person. And I will say, if I say anything that rubs you wrong or whatever, raise the red flag because I
Hmm.
don't want to know that. Because I can certainly not bring any of those pieces in.
Hmm.
But I think mostly where it comes in is just because it's just part of who I am, right? So I'm not trying to teach anything. I'm not trying to say you should think this too. I'm just being authentic to who I am, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That definitely makes sense. Um, yeah, I mean, I've had experiences where clients have brought up the fact that they're spiritual, either in an intake form or during the intake process. And there are certain moments where I feel like the concerns that they're bringing to therapy feel like they could be really supplemented well with spirituality. And I guess I'm curious, like, have you had experiences like that where you feel like, oh, if like it could be a good idea to bring this into the discussion? And like, what was that like for you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, truthfully, I love it because we can share a language. When somebody is already on a spiritual path or has some spiritual beliefs, it's a whole other. I mean, I feel like it's the most healing environment, and I will say why. Um, so it's always really nice, but they'll say something small like, I have a client who did a big ayahuasca thing down in South America. Well, that tells me a lot about her, right? And so
Hmm.
naturally, I'm not going to delve into what I do, but that gives me enough information so that there are times where she might be having a hard time and we might sort of dip back into that, or it will color the things that I'm saying because I think that she can hear this, right?
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I guess like something that came up while you were talking about that was like what would you say are the like biggest benefits to like discussing spirituality with your clients? Like if they know that you have that interest yourself, like does that contribute to rapport at all in your experience? Like have you noticed that?
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know that I ever have like real, like one-on-one discussions because it's really
Mhm.
like their session, right? But the reason that I hold it in my body and in my mind is my true belief that, we are greater consciousness, we're conscious awareness having this earthly experience. And in this earthly experience, we're very identified with, like, I'm very identified with the character of Megan. I'm
Hmm.
very identified with Megan's story, the difficult things. And and that can be really hard. And
Hmm.
so if I don't have the ability to pull out from that and realize, oh, this is my life on earth, and easy things will happen and hard things will happen, and easy things and hard, and this is just part of a life, right?
Hmm.
If I don't have, or having that perspective is just gives me like an enormous amount of peace and relief from suffering. I mean, a lot of this is kind of, Buddhist thought and perspective too, right? So, so I don't think I have any like big like spiritual discussions like we're having now with my clients, but they will say things, and then, I understand that there will be openings, and then, I think as a therapist, and I think as a newer therapist, you will just hear something and you might say, "Oh, I'm wondering what your beliefs are about that."
Hmm.
It's like being sort of curious about where somebody is on their path. They might not even call it a spiritual path, right? But a path to sort of understanding themselves. And I do think, just as something to think about, getting people to think about the idea of disidentifying a little bit, so that everything in the world that happens doesn't feel so personal, which can be very intense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you encountered clients in the past where your definitions about spirituality or just spiritual concepts differ a lot from your client? And how have you navigated those sorts of experiences?
My dog is scratching like crazy. Hold on.
Okay,
No, 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 no. Don't do that. Sorry, sorry, sorry.
you're
Uh,
good.
I actually haven't really,
Mm,
I'm always kind of surprised at how open people are to, like, if it comes up, people are very open. I think most people, if they are not practicing something spiritual, or not, they don't understand, or they don't think that they're on that path. I think most people that I have come into contact with are very open to it.
hmm.
So, and I'm not talking about religion because I'm really not religious.
Hmm.
I mean, I suppose that I have worked with people who were religious, and that's cool. It just never, that's never a problem. But I'm really always surprised. People are very open. I think there's a real yearning to have
Hmm.
greater understanding, you know, of why we're here and who we really are.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it doesn't surprise me all that much that you haven't encountered too much conflict with different definitions and ideas because it goes back to that concept that is definitely not my like original thought, but the idea that at the core of like lots of different religions and like practices of spirituality, like the core principles like tend to be the same, and it is
Yeah,
like this like universal awareness and um like you said, like removing yourself from identifying so closely with the narrative that you've made for yourself so far.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And you're right. When you boil down all the religious traditions, they all end up being this, they all point to the same thing,
Hmm.
right? That God, or whatever, whatever the name is, the higher power name um, is love. And these things that we experience in life that get in the way of our experiencing love is born of fear. But that's
Hmm.
part of the human experience.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's such an interesting point that you bring up because I feel like so much in therapy school, we're taught to remain neutral and like not really let our own opinions influence the therapy session, but coming in with this idea of love versus fear and and rooting in love and um moving through the world from this place of love
Yes.
in contrast to fear, like that is very much like not a neutral position to take.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, like, what do you make of not staying neutral in sessions to make room for those kinds of conversations and those kinds of ideas?
Well, I mean, no, like when somebody's experiencing fear, anxiety, depression, like nobody wants to hear that's not real. Let's just get back to love.
Hmm.
No. So, how it works is that you embody it. Like you are the loving entity in the room as much as you can be. And you're validating their very human experience.
Hmm.
And so, again, it's like, it's not how to do it, it's how to be it.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
for the most part.
Yeah. I mean, because I feel like so much of the time as therapists, we're modeling healthy relationships but we're modeling so many other things. And you saying that like we like model love and like if that's like how we practice spirituality, like that's just a very interesting concept for me that you're bringing up right now with that.
Yeah, and I think the being versus doing is something that we're constantly needing to remind ourselves, right? Because we live in such a doing culture. I mean, capitalism itself is very do, do, do. You know, we
Mhm.
measure our worth by how productive we are, how much money we make,
Mhm.
you know, how young we can stay looking. I mean, just it's do, do, do all the time, right?
Mhm.
So to remember that the being part is really where it's at.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I've definitely noticed with clients, like they can get so caught up in the day-to-day things that I can see almost like I want to help them figure out how to like zoom out more and see like, okay, what is like actually meaningful to me? And I feel like when you like allow yourself to zoom out and like reflect on like your values and how you want to be leading your life, like I think that helps like so much more than with like the day-to-day
Yeah.
micro things.
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, this will take you back to your therapist classes or whatever, but it's like you listen, everybody comes in with the content of their character self,
Hmm.
right? And they're lost in the content.
Hmm.
And you, as a therapist, are sitting there, and sometimes you might think, can we get past that? Can we can we move on, right? And
Hmm.
it is not our job to tell them to do that. But again, if somebody's come in with the same story over and over, and they are just stuck in this material loop, and
Hmm.
they have so much invested in this story and in this suffering, you can ask, I wonder what it would be like to set that down. I wonder what it would be like to discover something that help you set that down momentarily. Or, it's like you can be curious about that, right? I
Hmm.
think they don't, first of all, people don't take advice and they don't want to hear too much about who you are personally. It's really their session. But I think they also want you to have some sort of larger view. I think they want you to hold a larger view for them, if that makes sense.
Hmm. How do you feel about that idea of like them or like them our clients maybe wanting us to hold that larger view for them?
I mean, I don't think that they think about wanting that. I just think that as humans, we do. I mean,
Mhm.
aren't you always looking for somebody who's kind of a mentor or somebody that's a little further along than you, somebody that can, especially when you're having a hard time, right? Like everybody's looking for help. That's why they come to therapy.
Mhm.
There's something I'm not seeing. There's something I need to
Mhm.
change, right? And so as a spiritual person, but also maybe just as a decent therapist, I pretty quickly am able to really take in the person and then be able to, um, understand what their suffering is,
Hmm.
then I can get a larger view. I can see their healed self
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
pretty easily. So I hold that in sessions for them, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing how your own practice of spirituality influences a lot of like how you interact with your clients. Like, how would you say, like, when you're rooted in your spiritual practice, like, how does that affect how you show up and how you maybe like perceive your clients?
Well, I think it's just a lens which I'm always looking through,
Hmm.
right? Like if you are really, or if you're steeped in any particular theory, that's the lens you're looking through. So I would say with a spiritual mindset, I'm always also trying to look at what is the lens I'm looking through and how can I broaden this? How
Hmm.
can I, you know, this is a little bit more of a Buddhist perspective, but how can I attempt not to know?
Hmm.
Because if I hold space where I'm not so sure about everything, there's way more possibility all of a sudden in the room. Like if
Yeah.
I don't know, but if I come in and I'm like, I think I know everything, even if I'm not saying it, I've closed down the window of possibility, right?
Yeah, yeah, I've definitely noticed how humility is like one of the most important values to have as a therapist. And just like, even if you know what a client means by a certain phrase or a certain like spiritual practice, like really taking on that stance of not knowing can be so helpful because you learn about all these like nuances
Yeah.
that like differ from person to person, even though generally we're all like talking about the same thing. Like there are underlying experiences that affect this like more general experience.
Yeah, so I would say, my words of advice. I know people don't take advice, but Anna, for you as a, you're early in your career, I would say you just stay on your path and notice how that shows up in your sessions,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Are there another question I have though is, are there any like ethical responsibilities that I should be aware of when talking about spirituality? Because I know it can be kind of a touchy subject for some people.
Well, again, I wouldn't like dive into it.
Hmm.
Like, we're not, we don't come in with our agenda. We want to understand what they're wanting, right?
Hmm.
And so I think, and we're never trying to push our
Hmm.
thoughts on somebody else.
Hmm.
So if you're really holding those as, a value, I don't think that you're going to get into trouble.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, just continuing to take that stance of humility and not knowing.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Right. Because you ultimately, there is only the subjective. So you know your experience, right? But you can never totally know somebody else's, you know. And at the same time, we are all interconnected. So there's a bit of a paradox there.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, it was so good to talk to you about this. I hope it was helpful.
Definitely was. Thank you so much, Megan.